Hello and welcome to another episode of Flashback to the Track. As always, I'm Mark and I'm joined by my good friend James. James, how are things?
Things are new? It's great. It's new. You know what's always great and new? Having maximum strength relief provided by Blue Emu. That's right. Blue Emu giving us maximum strength relief, giving you maximum strength relief of your tired muscles and joints. Work it into your regimen of recovery because why not? It's a great source of maximum strength relief. I mean, I don't know what other thing provides me as much relief, probably other than water. You know what I mean, Mark? Or electrolytes.
Electrolytes, yes, but not for my tired muscles and joints.
No, I mean, water's good for your tired muscles and joints. So sometimes you
water's
get
good preemptively, and then Blue Emu afterwards is a fantastic.
They go hand in hand like peanut butter and jelly.
And you can combine them. If you get a Blue Emu recovery bath, you put it in a tub of water.
Oh, Mark, you
climb in.
Dang, he just did that.
That's right.
Mark just did that.
That's right.
And it is his favorite product. I would recommend those bath pods.
They are fantastic. They smell amazing.
And you know what? It's like, I like bath bombs too from like a Lush or like, any of these other stores. You can get them at like Targets and Walmarts nowadays. But like, it's just oddly satisfying to watch the Blue Emu bath pods, just boom in your...
Dropping them in is, it's a lot of fun because you see them like fizz up and you get that menthol smell and it's just, it's fantastic.
That's right. But you know what's great about the rest of their products? They work fast, just like the bath bombs, but they don't stink. So that's always good. But I do like the smell of the bath bombs because like it kind of clears out my nose a little bit too. It's like I'm getting like a 2-for-1 there. I feel like I'm getting cleansed internally a little bit with, just breathing it in, plus the hot air from the water. Because I always like a hot bath, I'll do a cold bath too. I like an ice bath. I know you've played sports and you probably had your share of ice baths.
Climb into the ice bath.
Yeah.
Not fun. We should just do our legs though. We'd get like those big, you get a garbage can and then we just do our legs after football practice.
It was funny because I was watching Ted Lasso and like the dude was like dipping his whole body into the trash can full of ice. And I was like, I don't know how sanitary that is.
Yeah. The supercars drivers do that because they do multiple races in a weekend. So they'll do like ice bath is like a huge deal in that series. Like they all do them. So
yes.
But we're not talking about that today, James. We're talking about American racing, like all American racing. We're talking about one of our favorite racing series ever. We're going to talk about Trans Am today. And we're going to talk about like golden era Trans Am. We're going to talk about 80s Trans Am.
Car Club of America Trans Am Series.
Trans Am Series has always been a little romantic. One of those series that fits some of the top American-made cars.
Corvettes, Camaros, Mustangs.
Against international cars.
Porsches and Datsuns. These are quick cars. 2,600 pounds, about 600 horsepower. The boast of who's who of past champions. Parnelli Jones, Mark Donohue, Peter Gregg.
We're going to see some really fender-banging classic American road racing.
In the 60s and 70s, they really mimicked the road production cars, but at this point in Trans Am, we have beasts of vehicles, purpose-built racing machines that have one intention, and that's being all out and badass. So we're going to look at the 1983 Caesar Palace Grand Prix for the Trans Am competitors.
The streets, the parking lots of Las Vegas, Nevada. So
yeah, I mean, they have run on the streets of Nevada, but this was before they raced on the streets of Nevada. Back when Caesar's Palace was baller and a destination not just for people who wanted to cut loose on the Las Vegas Strip, but also for racing competitors. Because in the early 80s, Caesar's Palace held Grand Prix. So very interesting time too, because also this is an era when motorsport had such a flux of manufacturer support. I'm like crazy because you talk about all American at this point in Trans Am, you got everything. You got international cars, international stars. It's a destination for a lot of great racing drivers and a legitimately serious series, So let's kind of like dive into this a little bit. So Mark, talk to us about Scca Trans Am.
Yeah, so Trans Am has been known as sort of the international sedan series for sports cars. Like James said before, like cars could, fans could relate to the cars because they had this like stock appearance. They looked like road cars, and that's important for win on Sunday, sell on Monday. You know, the series has combined manufacturers and drivers from all parts of the world. You know, some of the most unique race courses of all time in North America. Like we said, Caesar's Palace parking lot course. They would go to Brainerd in Minnesota. They would go to lots of tracks that most people probably haven't even heard of. You know, like they would race in Palm Springs. They would race at, what's that other track in Florida they would go to where like, if you went off track, there was no wall and you'd like end up in like a gator pond. I remember Lynn St. James talking about it.
So that is
was that Moroso?
That is Moroso, which is
yeah
today Palm Beach International Raceway.
Okay, yeah.
It is a totally different layout than it was back in the day. But you know, I think there's an episode of Top Gear where you can check it out when it was still Moroso, and that lake exists. And I think Clarkson almost took a visit in it in a IROC Camaro. I think it was like a cheap car challenge. But yeah, in this period of time, Trans Am had a plethora of cars that made anywhere between 300 and 600 horsepower and weighed less than 3,000 pounds. These were tube frame chassis at this point with like the, you know, composite bodies on top of the car, where, you know, a decade earlier, we were seeing like Challengers, Chargers, AMCs, and they were steel bodied cars. And the sport has progressed so much to see it go into a more so sedan style, international sedan style racing series where Corvettes, Camaros, Pontiac Trans Ams, Mustangs, and Capris compete against Porsches and Datsuns. Really crazy to see. And like Mark said, they went to some pretty great tracks. In 1983, they visited Moroso Motorsports Park, aka Palm Beach International Raceway, Summit Point Motorsports Park, Portland International Raceway, Seattle International Raceway, aka Pacific Raceway. Shout out to everyone out over in the northern western part of the world because of, well, our country, my country, the US, because that's a pretty cool track. I've heard a lot of great stories about that. Mid-Ohio Sports Car Course, Road America, Brainerd, Circuit Troyes Riviera, which was a street course. And he says it much better than me because he puts that French Canadian accent on it.
Quebecois friends.
Quebecois. Sears Point, they would visit that twice at the beginning of the season and towards the end. And of course, Riverside International Raceway. Rest in peace, Riverside. I want to go to that subdivision and kind of drive around the track because apparently the houses are laid out in a format that replicates the racing track. So that's kind of cool. And Mark, in 83, it was the story of Budweiser Camaro team racing at that time.
The 18th season of the Trans Am Championship would be one of the most important in the series history. The 12 events run in 1983 were the most since 1969. The Budweiser Trans Am Series sponsorship offered a much-needed boost in prize money and visibility. Budweiser was also involved in sponsoring what became one of the most dominant teams in Trans Am since the Penske-Donahue team of 1968. Neil Diatley, a Portland, Oregon entrepreneur, teamed with John Dick and drivers David Hobbs, Willie T. Ribbs, and for a couple of races, Jerry Brasfield and John Paul Jr. to destroy the competition.
That's right. Willie T. Ribbs and David Hobbs were dominant in that 1983 season, driving the number 28 and 29 Budweiser cars, respectively. They had the fastest lap in all but one race so far coming into Caesar's Palace. The team had the fastest lap, either one of them. And they also won 7 of the 11 races run so far in 83, with Ribbs winning 4 times and Hobbs capturing 3. But Willie tailed Hobbs in the standings. He's leading the standings coming in because he's a little more consistent. Ribbs had 3 DNFs.
You know, Mark, most people might not know, but there are very notable names in this race in 1983. Why don't you kick us off with some notable starters from the Caesar Palace Grand Prix?
So they're not strange, they're notable.
They're notable. We made notes about them. That's why they're notable.
All right, so first up of our notable stars, we have Roger Penske Jr. That's right, the son of Roger Penske and competitor of various formula competitions. He's making his Trans Am Series debut at the Caesars Palace Grand Prix. So his first time in a tin top Trans Am car.
Yeah, and I think he's only raced formula cars so far throughout his career. He has some racing experience, but it's interesting too, Mark, because Roger Penske's had some history in Trans Am. I feel like Trans Am was one of his first professional series that he won a championship in North America.
Yeah, did field a Trans Am effort in the early 70s. I believe it was it the Matador?
I think it was with the Matador as well.
Yeah, I'll have to look that up again. But I think we mentioned it in our video about Roger Penske or about NASCAR teams that have fielded sports car teams. So you can go check that out on our YouTube.
Yeah, it's crazy how that Matador looked very similar to the Matador that was run in NASCAR competition. Next up, Lynn St. James, a pioneer in the world of motorsports and one of the most notable female racing drivers from the 80s and 90s. She had a good stint in the Trans Am series. She made a total of 53 starts in her career and had 7 top 5s in the series. But Trans Am wasn't the only thing she was notable for. Having raced over 40 years, she is the 1992 Indianapolis 500 Rookie of the Year and has victories in the 24 Hours of Daytona and the 12 Hours of Sebring. And most notably, set a closed course speed record of over 225 miles an hour.
If you have not listened to the Dinner with Racers with Lynn St. James, I highly recommend you do because it's very interesting. So I would love to sit down and have a chat with Lynn St. James. She came to racing very late in life, comparably to other drivers, just doing driving schools at Moroso and places like that, and became a very successful race car driver, driving in Roush's program. She joked that Jack Roush used to treat her like garbage, but he treated every driver like garbage, so it was fine.
Yeah.
But
par for the course there.
Yeah, exactly. So up next, we have Paul Miller. And if that name sounds familiar, yes, that is the Paul Miller of Paul Miller Racing, the Lamborghini team in IMSA. He joined SCCA in 1964 at the age of 19. Participating in club races throughout the mid-1960s and early 70s. He also started to compete with his brother Kempner in Trans Am and IMSA competition. As I said, now is an IMSA team owner and a Rolex 24 Hours of Daytona winner and a Michelin Endurance Challenge champion. So yeah. Paul Miller Racing, this year the number 1 Lamborghini, because Jimmy Johnson stole their number 48. But,
yeah. So he's number 1. Next up, we've mentioned him, and now we're going to go in depth about him. David Hobbs, the international racing veteran with over 30 years of experience at all levels, including sports cars, touring cars, F500s, Indy cars, IMSA, Can-Am, Trans Am, NASCAR, and Formula One. What a amazing resume he has. This is like his first year competing in the Trans Am competition, and solely he's competing in Trans Am this season. Very interesting. He's also had a history of broadcasting. We all know him with his time with CBS Sports, being alongside Ken Squire. And fun fact, in 1983, he also appeared in the comedy Stroker Ace. Nice.
And if our last notable driver is Caitlyn Jenner, the 1976 Olympic gold medalist turned racing driver, now turned possible governor, is at the beginning of their racing career, making her Trans Am debut in this race. So Jenner would go on to race in Trans Am throughout the 1980s for Ford, and also raced in IMSA, winning the 1986 12 Hours of Sebring in an IMSA GTO class. So Caitlyn Jenner went on to race with Scott Pruitt at Roush and do all kinds of racing throughout the 80s and 90s. So someone that just, classic gentleman driver, just wanted to go and get it done. So Caitlyn Jenner.
And much like Lynn St. James, as you mentioned, someone who started racing later on in their life, almost like a second career. So pretty cool to see Caitlyn Jenner make this list. And I know that she raced even recently, won a race too. So very competitive even to this day. So let's take a look at the track. This course is at Caesars Palace. It was a temporary street course that was located just off the strip, but technically it was in the parking lot at the back of the Caesars Palace. Beautiful, beautiful setting, Mark. Nothing like just being back at the
it's like a Formula E track, They just put some cones up. They're like, all right, this will be circuit.
I think a big appeal of it was the location.
That's the thing. You're right. You're in Vegas. You can stay at the hotel. You can walk there, and it's about selling. That's what street races are supposed to be. It's about selling a festival atmosphere and selling. You're in downtown in this exotic location. It's awesome. We can go partying. We don't have to drive out to the middle of nowhere to go to the racetrack, like Lime Rock Park or Mid Ohio, like out in the middle of nowhere. So it works out.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. It's a destination for people to come vacation. Now it's a destination for a racing event. So it's just another feather in the cap of the Las Vegas city. Fun fact about this track, it had hosted Formula One races, not the specific layout. Specific track did host Formula One races in 1981 and 1982. Those Grand Prix only lasted those 2 years, but Trans Am competed in 1983 and in 1984, and also marked in these 2 years, kart competed at the Caesars Palace Grand Prix circuit in 1983 and 1984. So really big series came and raced here, and also Can-Am competed too during the Formula One time period. So it definitely had some weight to have these big series come and run at the circuit. Obviously it didn't last. It's a shame, but still, like, think about the time period. That's pretty cool to have like racing, like series such as Formula One come to America and then go to Las Vegas. Definitely adds to the tourist value of Las Vegas.
And at a length of 1.25 miles, a very small racetrack. Of course, consists of 5 left-hand turns. No right-hand turns on this circuit. 5 left-hand turns. It's basically an oval, and it's obviously counterclockwise.
Yes.
And it's just like a misshapen oval, kind of what it looks like. And if you're a rally driver, you get every corner from 2 to 5 in your pace notes. So yeah, it's an interesting circuit, but not very technical. Just modified oval. So you're just kind of running around the perimeter of the initial F1 circuit in a way. So
yeah, it's funny because if you look at the F1 circuit, which, I mean, don't get me wrong, it doesn't look anything special because a lot of the turns look so similar. I prefer this circuit. It's fast, it's high paced, it's got a lot of turns where you're just like kind of have to really feather the throttle, light braking in, kind of maybe even trail braking just to get the car under control, but a lot of rolling speed, because if you kill any of that speed coming off, you've killed your lap, because there's a lot of straightaways on this circuit too, man. Like, that's the thing.
True, yeah. So average speed about 99 miles an hour. Top speed they hit is about 120 miles an hour on the straightaway at this track. So they're not going super fast at this racetrack, but it's a 1.25 mile parking lot circuit. So you can't, you're not gonna be whipping around there. So
I don't know, man. In 1980, 83, compared to like what road cars were really putting out at that time period, I'd say that's pretty fast, even just to do like an average of like 90 some miles an hour, man. Like, just because of the time period. I feel like cars back then weren't as beasts as they are nowadays, where like any car can just easily hit 100. Like, I don't know. It just, for the time period, it seems kind of fast.
You're just going to have a lot of Corvette dudes being like, well, not Corvette can hit that, So, but yeah.
Corvettes were, no offense, they weren't that fast back in the day, unless you had like a race car. There were shows. A lot
of people wearing high white socks and sandals right now that are going to disagree with you.
So
let's talk about the broadcast, James. This is an ESPN broadcast for the auto racing ESPN program. So
that's right. This was like a period when ESPN, the total sports network, had all the sports in the world on their network, because of this time period, they had to fill the broadcast space. They needed content. They were a 24-hour sports network. They needed to live up to that. This was before ESPN too. So it's kind of funny in this time period to think about like ESPN needing to fill the broadcast space. And nowadays they have like 5 channels full of content. It's insane. In the booth for this event, doing the play-by-plays, the great Bob Jenkins is joined by Larry Newberg. Simple cast, no pit road reporters, nothing like that. And you can tell by the green screen, they are obviously at the Caesars Palace Grand Prix. Definitely there. They're
definitely there in person. I also like that ESPN spared no expense and made them share a microphone. So he's like, let me talk, and now you talk. Okay, yep, great.
What year was ESPN founded again?
I wouldn't be able to tell you.
I'll do a quick little search on that.
But the great thing about Bob Jenkins is that's his actual voice. That's not a TV voice. He sounds like that all the time. Like, if you talk to him, that's just how he sounds.
I mean, he's just, and that's what's cool. It's like people don't understand some of these people who are broadcasters when they're talking on the mic. That is just normally how they talk. They just have the voice for broadcasting. It's like you or I, Mark. We might not have the face for television, but we have the voice for radio.
I speak for yourself, all right? But
so modest. ESPN was founded in 1979, so still early on. I was
going to say that, and then I was like, no, that's not right.
Yeah, because I was like 30 for 30s. Didn't they start in 2009? They did. 30 for 30s did start in
Broke.
2009.
You should watch Broke. It's the best one.
Broke is the best one, directed by Morgan Spurlock.
Also,
Great insights.
Bono's is pretty good too, though.
I don't know, man. For this sake, we have to just say winning time. Reggie Miller's story is great, but Tim Richmond, To the Limit, definitely the best 30 for 30. Just got to say it because we're the auto racing podcast. We have to support the auto racing 30 for 30. Also, Falling Skies and Birth of Big Air, because I love Jeff Tremaine and the stories.
Well, let's get into the race. So the green flag is out for the Trans Am Caesars Palace Grand Prix. And at the front of the field, Paul Newman. That's right. The Paul Newman, the actor. Paul Newman is wasting no time as he dives. That's a daring move, James. Dives inside of pole sitter Willie T. Ribbs. And for a split second, he takes the lead of the Caesars Palace Grand Prix, but carries a little too much speed, goes a little too tight, and he washes out on exit, and Ribbs gets by and retakes the lead as the field makes its way into turn 2. But Paul Newman, man, he saw his opportunity and he was like, I'm going for it, and we didn't have him in our notable starters. You know why? Because Paul Newman's a professional race car driver.
He is a notable name, especially during this period, because not a lot of people took this seriously. They thought it was a PR stunt, but come on, Paul Newman's driving a factory Nissan. He has had ties with Nissan throughout the 80s. He definitely is a racing driver, and any racing driver will tell you, you got to pass him while you can. And he took the opportunity to go to third to first, but unfortunately he would go back to third. And that was the only chance he had to take the lead during this race. So after 8 laps, Willie T. Ribbs has really stretched out the lead. He has a very big margin over second place runner Tom Gloy and third place runner Paul Newman. Ribbs, he's pretty much in his own zip code, man. He's the class of the field. And he has begun to catch the tail end of the field, and he's starting to put some cars a lap down. And Mark, oh no, Paul Newman is spun in the first turn, man. Going from third, and he is dropping now like a rock after battling for the lead on lap 1. Shame for Paul Newman. It's going to really put him back in the running order now.
Yeah, he was 8th in points coming into this race. So Paul Newman is legit, people. Back in the front, Ribbs is still working through lap traffic, which has allowed the second place runner, Tom Gloy, to kind of close up a bit, but not really. It's tight confines on the circuit as the drivers make their way around the slower lap traffic. And this was a time where Trans Am kind of had, all the pro drivers, and there was some gentleman drivers in the field as well, but there was no class for them. They had to compete against the pros. So some of them were a little bit slower and, would be lapped early on, but it made for exciting racing because you got a lot of lap cars getting in the way.
Yeah, not only that too, but there is a disparity between the factory teams, and Ribbs is driving for a factory Chevrolet team and a lot of the privateers that are running in this series. And it's great to have the mixture of privateer racers and factory teams because it gives people the opportunity to get into a pro series. But about after 14 laps now, Mark, Ribbs is still out front, having led from the drop of the green flag. I don't know who can catch him.
Except for those 30 feet that Paul Newman was leading. But,
that doesn't count.
Doesn't
That's not a lap.
Because he didn't cross the start-finish line.
That's like if you were like, oh, man, there's like 200 lead changes at Talladega around the track throughout the race.
If you wipe off scoring loops, yeah.
Yeah.
But Richard Wong has crashed his Camaro, and he has stopped just off track, and that will bring out a full course caution. Second place running Tom Gloy, though, is on pit road with an issue. And that's going to put him a lap down because the track is so small. And he's now back in traffic when the race resumes on lap 23.
And funny enough about Gloy, he got on pit road just before the caution came out too. So he was having some issues, and coincidentally that yellow came out. So it did save him a little bit because he could have went further back. But now on lap 28, we get back going. Caitlyn Jenner goes for a spin in turn 1. And now we're back under yellow. The yellow number 33 Thunderbird just came around and spun and then got stuck in the sand trap. We call that technically getting beached. That's right. That's a technical term for it. The safety crews will have to get out there and retrieve that car. But you know what, Mark? It's okay because we'll get back racing eventually.
Lap 33, green flag flies with Willie T. Ribbs still leading. Interested to see the lap cars starting up front in between the leaders. There was no pass around. So if lap cars were trapped between the first and second place car, they just stayed there. So nowadays we do pass arounds. But you know what that meant, James? Caution periods were a lot shorter because we didn't have to do 5 pass arounds and a class split and everything else. So it's quite an advantage for Ribs because he's got that cushion between second and third, and he's able to gap himself from the field like he needed any help. He's the fastest car. And again, is anyone going to catch him?
I don't know, but
probably not.
No idea. But let's go a little further back in the field and see this wonderful battle between Wally Dallenbach Jr. That's right.
Wally to the podcast. Wally Dallenbach Jr.
Very early on in his racing career. He's challenging David Watson now for second position as the duo make their way around lap cars, which is really thrilling the battle because, come on, lap cars always get in the way of the lead lap cars. But Dave is able to work his way around the lap cars a little bit more proficiently than Wally Dallenbach is, and that is just going to give him the advantage. And while he's doing that, why doesn't ESPN just put a timing clock on that blue number 37 to give us a perspective of how fast he's going around the Las Vegas circuit?
Watson out of turn number 5 onto the main stretch again as he crosses under the grid.
And Mark, he's going to clock in at 42.1 seconds around the Caesar Palace track. Not too shabby.
It's a really cool graphic that we get that. It's just like, that's our very early timing and scoring is the Timex timing clock. And it's
that
just
probably
like,
won them an Emmy back then.
Oh, probably. Yeah.
Innovative sports technology.
Those are the Emmys they across the hall on Thursday, you know, but like, oh, those are the technical awards. Those are down at the end of the hall, sir. But again, Paul Newman, he's having trouble in that Datsun on the circuit, and he's now spun coming out of the final corner. But he gets it righted in the right direction, and you know he bookmarked both ends of the course. He spun at both ends. So yeah, Paul Newman just struggling day, which is not typical of him. He had a podium finish that year. He was 8th in points. It's just something's got to be off on that car.
I believe it's the car. It's not Newman. I mean, probably just not his day. So it just happens in racing. But meanwhile, up front, why don't we put the timing clock on leader Willie T. Ribs to see how quick he's going around this track?
Willie T. Ribs off of turn number 5 onto the front stretch. Remember, Dave Watson's clocking was about 42.1, and Ribs.
And he's going to clock in at 40 seconds flat. And that is quicker than his qualifying pace, which, unlike second place runner Dave Watson, he was running slower than his qualifying pace. So Ribs is cooking it out there. And in my opinion, he's one bad hombre at this point.
Elliott Forbes Robertson, the defending Scca Trans Am champion, he spins in the final corner, and he was running 5th when he looped that number 1 Pontiac Trans Am. Only a local yellows displayed, though. He gets the car back rolling, gets back in the race. Hooray for local yellows. Though he would go down a lap and he'd be out of contention for the victory. Elliott Forbes Robinson, he'd go on to do all kinds of prototype racing. Solid driver.
Very solid driver. He also had that Son of a Gun STP sponsorship on there too. Pretty cool. I always like seeing the Son of a Gun stuff back in the day. I don't know if you know what that product was.
I have no idea.
So you know what Lucas Oil Slick Mist is?
Yes.
It's basically Lucas Oil Slick Mist, just like a car detailer called Son of a Gun. Clever. We'll go back up towards the front of the pack, and David Hobbs is going to make the pass on Wally Dallenbach Jr. for the 3rd position, putting the team Budweiser Camaros in the podium spots. And that also allows Hobbs to inch that much closer to the 1983 championship. Also, must be that Wally Dallenbach's fading a little bit here.
Yeah, and he only had to finish Hobbs 13th or better, and he would clinch that championship. So just wants to run a smart race. Don't get involved in any issues. You know, don't do anything crazy. Just win that championship. The number 80 car would later spin in turn 1, dropping a considerable amount of oil and fluid on the course, and that caused another few cars to spin in the aftermath, which brings out the full course yellow for the 3rd time in the race, which gives us time for some commercial breaks.
4 hours a day, 365 days a year of the most exciting sports action ever on ESPN, with a greater variety of events and more live programming than we've ever shown before.
It's never too early to start talking about bowl season. And 1983 Bowl Bonanza. That's right, 8 bowl games featuring the most iconic college football bowls, all on ESPN. Check your local TV guide and get the full schedule for Bowl Bonanza 83. Only 8 bowl games back then? Jeez, now how do
I think they only
had
8. They only had 8, I think.
Yeah. We have like 64 now. It's funny because like in the broadcast, they're like, it's great for teams like Boston College. It's like nowadays I expect Boston College to be in a bowl game. If not, they really
There's
suck.
5-win teams in bowl games now.
You don't have to have a winning season to get into a bowl game.
No, that's the thing. It's like five wins, you're in a bowl. It's like, but the best bowls, James, the ones before Christmas, the ones like I want to watch the San Diego County Credit Union Poinsettia Bowl. I want to watch the R&L Carriers New Orleans Bowl. You know, I want to watch Eastern Michigan play North Texas. Those are the ones that are great because like when Eastern Kentucky is playing Middle Tennessee, it's like 69-69 is the final score. You know, they go to 14 overtimes. It's fantastic. Let's do it.
Exactly. That's when you have college players giving their heart and soul and playing like it is their last game because it means a lot to get that bowl game. That's how you really end your season on that positive note. Yeah, you could have a losing season, but you got that bowl game win. Also, nothing beats the GoDaddy.com Bowl or the Bevo Brady's Bowl. Come on, who doesn't love when?
Come on, TaxSlayer.com Gator Bowl. Come on.
No, you could take a baseball stadium and make it a football stadium.
The bowl games that had NASCAR sponsors. The Quick Lane Bowl at Ford Field in Detroit. Okay, well, you know, let's jump ahead to 5 as we go see that Willie T. Ribbs is still going in turn 1 as 2 lap cars make contact in front of him, going spinning, and Ribbs somehow makes it by without any contact. So that was a big moment in front of the leader, and that could have taken Ribbs out of the race. One of the cars locked up in front of him, and he just gets squirrely to get around them. So, you know, that could have ruined everything.
Good job also on the second lap car there to not get involved with the first one and then allowed Ribbs to get by. So, like you said, hairy moment there for the leader. And that allows second place runner Dave Watson to close up on Ribbs. And now the 2 leaders are separated by 2 seconds with just 2 laps to go, Mark. This could be a thriller.
But I know from the Timex timing clock that Willie Ribbs is 2 seconds a lot faster than
that is true.
Dave Watson.
But has he used up his stuff by driving so hard?
Has he used up his stuff? Well, Ribbs does not seem phased though, James. He motors around the course and comes to what is the last lap, but no white flag is displayed for some reason in this series. There's no white flag, but Watson cannot close on Ribbs, and the pole sitter leads flag to flag, captures the victory at Caesars Palace. And what a performance, you know, and his teammate David Hobbs is the 1983 Trans Am champion. So a great day for that Budweiser Camaro team.
Except for the third one that went spinning. Sorry, third Budweiser car. You weren't meant to be, but it's okay. What a race, though, I got to say. You know, though it was most people would say it's a snoozer when someone leaves wire to wire. There was a lot of thrilling action for Willie to have to endure in that race. So still good action. Nice short broadcast. What was this, like less than an hour of a race?
47 minutes is the broadcast on YouTube, so you can go check that out.
And you know what? It was nice to see Joan Rivers show up at the beginning of this one as the honorary Grand Marshal, being carried and paraded around like she was Caesar himself.
Thank you to Randall Dubin for uploading this race.
Thanks, Randall.
Yeah, I'm sure Joan Rivers was just like hanging out in Vegas. So
I wonder how many jokes she was making about that. I wonder if she even remembers that. Does she remember that?
That's, you know, and some of the things, like when we do some of these events and we look back on them, like I want to ask some of these people, like if I ever meet Martin Brundle, I'm gonna be like, remember when you won that IROC race at the Cleveland airport? Like that's the first thing I would ask him. Be like, these guys won Le Mans. I'd be like, man, remember when you drove a Dodge Daytona at the Cleveland airport and you
kicked Dale Earnhardt's ass too?
Yeah. Emerson Fittipaldi and Rusty Wallace, like, come on.
But unfortunately, Darrell Waltrip wasn't in that race because he was injured in a practice crash day before at Daytona.
Terry Labonte drove for him, right?
That's right. Yeah, Terry Labonte was his substitute driver. At least they had 12 cars in that race, so good for them. So, Mark, the biggest question we always got to ask ourselves after we watch a race and do all this research: what did we learn from this?
Well, we learned that the Caesars Palace circuit, glad it doesn't exist anymore.
Should exist still on iRacing.
That'd be cool. Yeah, it's just, I don't know. It's just lame. Just like 5 left-hand turns and like, yeah, not a fan. But we learned that Willie T. Ribbs is a badass. But we already knew that. The thing is, I didn't learn anything. I was reiterated things that I already knew. Trans Am is awesome. Willie T. Ribbs is a badass. Like, you know, that's basically like what I learned. I learned that this was Caitlyn Jenner's first race. I didn't know that that's when her racing career started. So that was cool. Also, I think Wally Dallenbach was like 21 years old at this point or something, or 22. He's the youngest Trans Am champion ever, right? In 84, 85.
I believe so. And that was back when, driving a race car at this age wasn't super common. Racing drivers were, if you wanted a good driver in a pro series, you wanted someone almost in their 30s. That was considered to be a young age to get into motorsports. So, this is kind of interesting for Wally, and I think also for Wally, it kind of shaped the landscape for future motorsports drivers. But also remember, Wally is a prodigy of Wally Dallenbach Sr. So come on, apple doesn't fall too far from the tree there. Mark, I learned that Roger Penske Jr. ran something other than open wheel racing. I didn't know that. I thought he just had run open wheel cars in his career.
I didn't even know he was a racing driver. So I guess I learned that.
You learned that too. Of course, Caitlyn Jenner's first ever professional racing start. That's a pretty cool fact. Joan Rivers apparently showed up. That was pretty cool. And, I just did not know that the back parking lot of Caesars Palace was turned into a racing course.
They still do karting there?
Not at Caesars Palace. They do it at the Rio and the
Rio,
Westgate.
yeah.
I don't know. Actually, I don't know where Scca's Supernats are held because they weren't always held on a parking lot course. They used to be held at a circuit that was kind of a little further away from the strip. So, but Rock the Rio or just the Rio, I've run that race once. It was not great. Don't want to really talk about that. But yeah, I think this was pretty cool. And you know what? I think a big thing we learned is Willie T. Ribbs is a badass. And if you didn't know that, now you know that. So we just learned how much more of a badass he was by just how he led this race wire to wire. Amazing performance by the bad hombre, as he once said.
And also, too, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, this was one of those moments where you see his relationship with Chevrolet, too. Which most people don't know that he had spent time running Chevrolets. Everyone remembers his time with Roush.
Yeah, and he would go to Roush the next season. So
that's right, halfway
through. If things not working out at the Budweiser team, it's highly suggest check out the film Uppity. If you've not seen it, it's on Netflix. Go check it out. You can learn all about that. We actually did a review of Uppity on an old podcast. If you want to dig through our YouTube, it's on there or on wherever you get your podcasts. You can check that out. We had Christian Ryan on to talk about that. Final thing we have to do, James, is we have to rate the race. We have to get a ranking out of 10. I am going to give this race a 6. And the reason for that is Willie T. Ribbs dominated, which is cool. I'm not a fan of the circuit. I like the fact that it existed and it's a cool historical footnote. But I remember reading about the F1 races there and people saying it was super boring and super hot and not fun. Ribbs led flag to flag. It's got some cool notable starters, but it's nothing really special in terms of there's not a lot of great side-by-side racing and things like that. And although, I'm going to give it a 7. I'm going to bump it up because Paul Newman's move on lap 1 is worth 1 point. The fact that Paul Newman sent it into turn 1 and was just whatever, let's see what happens. And, good for him. Good for Paul.
Classic Formula One move. I'm just going to get in front of you and then defend. And then we'll see how the race of this Grand Prix goes.
Go have some Newman's own dressing to celebrate.
And eat yourself a Newman's own pizza. Remember, all of those products, donate their profits to charity. Newman's own. We didn't get paid to say that. We just like their food. I'd give it a 6.5. I'd meet it in the middle. Yes, it has really notable names from even Steve Saline's in this race as well. Like we said, Paul Newman, David Hobbs, Willie T. Ribbs, Wally Dallenbach Jr., Paul Miller, Lynn St. James, Caitlyn Jenner, but it doesn't have a lot to offer. It's a very interesting thing to look back and get perspective. And if you're a nerd such as Mark and I, there's a lot of cool things to nerd out on it. But I'd give it a 6.5. Not too thrilling. The coverage is what it is. It's 1983. You can't really critique it that much. But I do like how they give us live time and scoring. I feel like they used copyrighted music too at this time period. Because there's that cool I think it's a Flock of Seagulls song that's in the beginning of this coverage, which is pretty cool. And then the random dial-up tones that we hear in the race. You know what? I'd say the random dial-up tones gives it another half point, so I give it a 7.
7. So average is 7. Yeah, interesting race to check out. I would check out that whole 83 Trans Am season. There's lots of the races on YouTube, so it's a really cool season. Just really cool part of like American road racing history that people tend to forget about, you know. So good to go back and check it out. And people, Trans Am is still racing today. It's still awesome. Now the cars have big wings on the back, and they still look really cool. Yeah. The rule book is basically a paragraph. So it's fantastic. I would definitely go check out Trans Am. I'm hoping Ernie Francis Jr.'s success in SRX will turn some people on to Trans Am. Definitely go check it out. They're like everywhere every weekend. So like just look in your local paper. They're probably racing at a track near you. So
something like that. Yeah. And if anything, what's cool, you know, something too to note about the way the SRX is, the SRX cars are TA2 Trans Am cars.
Yep.
Just so you people know, little different engine platform, and the way they set them up is slightly different, but they're basically TA2 cars that Fury gets and then modifies them to be a SRX car. So hopefully that helps too. And Trans Am is really popular in Mark's favorite country, Australia.
I was just going to say that. Fun fact, they have a Trans Am series in Australia.
Yeah, they've been really making waves over there. Of course, the Australians love their V8s, and Trans Am cars have big, monstrous V8s and have replica bodies of muscle cars like the Challenger, the Mustang, Camaro. Nice.
And Trans Am streams their races for free.
Exactly. So you can go on YouTube and just check out this season or any season and look back. You know, I think this was the second Trans Am race we looked at, Mark, but you know, there's a lot more that I would like to look back with you on. I feel like there's some notable moments in Trans Am history that the world needs to be informed of. Yeah, that was fun, man. I always loved Trans Am, but you know what? It just doesn't get the coverage it did back in the 80s. This was definitely the height periods of the series, and the 90s too.
The 90s were, with the factory schemes with like
all those paint schemes. Ooh.
Yeah, so they were pretty amazing. But I think that's going to do it for this episode of Flashback to the Track. We've talked about Trans Am, Caesar's Palace. It's still there. You can go see it. You can probably go stand. Well, there's probably a development in that parking lot now. I don't know.
I think they probably made the casino bigger. So
they did. Yeah, the Forum shops are there now. Yeah, I haven't been to Vegas.
I've been to Caesar's Palace once, and I mean, don't get me wrong. Vegas is just not the city for me. It's not my vibe. It's pretty cool. It's definitely an experience. If you want to check it out, I would recommend checking it out. But you know, I'm not a very big Vegas person. It's a cool city though. And it's pretty interesting to see how much is there. It's like you can almost tour the world in Las Vegas because they got like an Eiffel Tower. They have like all these, when you go into Caesar's Palace, feel like you're kind of taken a little bit into like Rome, and there's like monuments and things like that.
There's cool stuff. You go to the Venetian and you can ride a gondola ride. Like there's lots of stuff to do. So it's definitely, if you like gambling, even if you don't like gambling, it's lots to do in Vegas, man. I went as a teenager with my family and like we had lots of fun. So
yeah, like we said, it's definitely a vacation destination
for sure.
Like we said, it's definitely a vacation destination that you should check out. Unfortunately, it doesn't have as much racing around the strip, but that's why Las Vegas Motor Speedway exists. And you can go there
45 minutes outside the city. So it's actually not that far.
Not that far. And you can go, and I think they even have like exotic rental car experiences that you can go drive on the track.
I've gone on the tour. I actually toured it in 2007, right after they had reconfigured it. The truck race ran in 2006 on the reconfigured surface. So I was there about 2 weeks before the Cup race ran their first race on the unfortunate reconfigured surface. I like the Old Vegas better.
Old Vegas is best.
Brendan Gaughan's truck shop, which is really cool. So that's gonna do it for this episode of Flashback to the Track. As always, I'm Mark, and I'm joined by James, and a special shout out to Blue Emu.
That's right. Blue Emu provides us with maximum strength relief of our tired muscles and joints. They make a plethora of products. Go online, check them out at blueemu.com. Find them at a local market, pharmacy, anywhere you go shop. Blue Emu is probably there. And find it, work it into your regiment of recovery, because we all have to recover. We all have to look after ourselves. And Blue Emu makes a plethora of great products to help your body recover, which is great.
So that'll do it. We'll see everyone in the next episode.